Course. Espíritu Santo, estamos buscando un fondo, pero a ver si hay... Bueno, este mismo. Estamos en directo, muchas gracias, bendiciones, bienvenidos todos. Vamos a estar leyendo One Course, Two Visions, de Robert Perry, Greg Mackey y Alan Watson. Y lo vamos a leer en inglés porque es en el idioma en el que aparece. A comparison of the teachings of the Circle of Atonement and Ken Wapnick on A Course in Miracles. Y comienza la introducción diciendo: We feel this book needed to be written. The specific catalyst for it is that we have been asked by students for years to clarify the relationship between Ken Wapnick's teaching and our own. For most of that time, we chose not to, because we were concerned that the confusion and misunderstanding it would stir up might outweigh whatever good it did. However, in the last few years, we have received so many such requests that we finally decided to respond to what appears to be a widespread need. We initially planned a newsletter, but when we went to write the articles we planned, we found we simply couldn't do them justice in the space allotted. The articles turned into long essays, and the newsletter became a book. We see this book, however, as fulfilling an important need beyond the need to understand how the circle's teaching relates to that of Ken Wapnick. Therefore, before you embark on reading it, we want to clarify the purpose for which it was written. Although responding to the views of an influential thinker is completely normal in the world, there are as yet no such established conventions around A Course in Miracles. Hence, we would like to begin by making the purpose of this book clear. In it, we discuss the teachings of Ken Wapnick and how those teachings relate to our own. As you will see, we often differ with his teachings and openly explain our reasons why. The book, however, is not intended as a personal attack on Wapnick. We fully acknowledge that he has had an immensely important role in relation to A Course in Miracles. In addition to being the third member of the original Course family, after Helen Schuckman and Bill Tedford, he helped edit the Course for publication, and since then has been its most prominent interpreter. If one believes that the writing and publishing of the Course was written by a higher plan, which we at the Circle do, it is difficult to deny that Wapnick was an important part of that plan, that he was, in essence, handpicked by Jesus to play a pivotal role. One also can help but respect the depth of his devotion into the Course. one also cannot help but respect the depth of his devotion to the course. He has dedicated his life to it and worked tirelessly to serve its students. He has taught things and done things that we do not agree with, but our perspective is that even this came out of his drive to honor the purity of the course. His influence, in fact, has pulled the entire course world toward a greater respect for the course's unique and radical elements that would have been there without him, that would have been there without him. I repeat the sentence. His influence, in fact, has pulled the entire course world toward a greater respect for the course's unique and radical elements than would have been there without him. We all owe a debt of gratitude to Ken Wapnick. This book is not meant to deny the debt. It is meant very simply to address Wapnick's views. Y aquí hay una llamada al pie, la número 1, que viene aparentemente al final del capítulo. Notes. In keeping with standard scholarly practice for referring to a thinker, we will refer to Ken Wapnick throughout the book by his last name, Wapnick. They have been very influential among course students, and we believe that discussion of those views by another teacher of the course will be helpful to many students. Where we attempt to refute his views, we will do so in a respectful manner, that is, with evidence from the course, never with speculation about the supposed biases, projections, and character flaws that gave rise to those views. We realize this book is not for every course student. It is written especially for those who put a great deal of stock in things like logical arguments and rules of evidence in deciding for themselves what the course teaches. In writing this book, we particularly had in mind those who teach the course to others. They have a special responsibility to come to informed views of the course rather than simply passing on views that may appear popular or authoritative but are not grounded in the course. This book is also not intended to stir up controversy. It is extremely easy to use any issue, especially that of differences in course interpretation, as an excuse to get caught up in controversy and take our focus off the real issue, that of living the course. That is why this is the only book the Circle has ever written about differences in interpretation. Our main focus has been and always will be on helping students to understand the course's teaching and apply its practice. We hope that this book will help students clarify for themselves what the course actually does teach, so that they can more effectively follow its teachings in their lives. The book is based on two premises. One, how one understands what the course says is a crucial issue for course students. 2. Hearing course interpreters respond to the views of other interpreters can put us in an ideal position to make up our own minds about what it says. The first premise should be self-evident. A Course in Miracles is a book that lays out an entire spiritual path. If the Course is your path, then how you understand and practice your personal path is determined by how you interpret this book. In this case, the Course is analogous to a cookbook. How you read the instructions determines what kind of dish you cook. If you interpret a cookbook differently than someone else, then you end up cooking a different dish. For example, one of us once has had soup that a housemaid made for the household. He hadn't done a lot of cooking, and so he thought that second tea salt meant 2 tablespoons of salt. He interpreted the cookbook instructions differently, and the result was an incredibly salty pot of soup. How we interpret the book, how we interpret the words of the Course matters. How we interpret the words of the Course matters. Different interpretations amount to different recipes for the spiritual life, and consequently turn out different dishes, different kinds of spiritual seekers. If you think the Course trains you in meditation, for instance, your path will be different than that of someone who believes that meditation is at odds with the Course's radical teaching. If you think the Course sends you out into the world to help strangers in need, your path will be different than that of someone who believes that such help makes the separation real. Words get a lot of bad press in Course circles. Barely a week goes by when we do not hear someone quote, "Words are but symbols of symbols." They are thus twice removed from reality. Manual 21, paragraph 1, phrases 9 to 10. Yet, imagine how shocked you would be if you purchased the Course only to find that it had no words, nothing but blank pages. These words tell us what to do in the kitchen of our spiritual life, what ingredients to put in what measure, and what order, and how long to bake the dish. In the end, we are meant to go beyond words, but the Course's strategy is to use words to tell us how to go beyond them. Thus, how we understand the Course's words make a huge difference. Yet, few of us, perhaps none of us, have the time, ability, and inclination to piece together the Course's entire thought system by sorry, by ourselves. I repeat the sentence. Yet, few of us, perhaps none of us, have the time, ability, and inclination to piece together the course's entire thought system by ourselves. Most of us can therefore benefit from skilled interpreters who have devoted their lives to understanding this teaching. Not only can we benefit, we already do benefit. I think there are few long-term course students who have not been influenced by interpreters. The course is so massive and so multifaceted that students tend to be hungry for simple concepts that can condense major aspects of the course into a small package. So hungry are we that when such a simple concept comes along, we often soak it up like a sponge without even realizing it. A great example of this is the notion that A Course in Miracles is a self-study course. This is one of the most accepted pieces of wisdom about the course, and yet nowhere does the course itself say that it is a self-study course. Someone came up with that idea, and we all just took it in and passed it around without any actual evidence for it. In other words, we have all been influenced by that interpreter, whoever it was. In our experience at the circle, many of the simple concepts through which students see the course come from the teaching of Ken Wapnick. He has a knack for reducing the course to a series of simple concepts and then repeating those concepts again and again. The result is that many students have taken in elements of his framework without remembering or even knowing where those elements came from. Others have taken those elements in because they came from him. They believed that he was the authority of the course and that what he said was the final word. Still others have taken those elements in because they found Wapnick's presentation generally persuasive, but perhaps they might not have if there existed a true marketplace of ideas in which there were multiple options which were in public dialogue with each other. This is why we believe issues of course interpretation need to be discussed out in the open. Two factors are relevant here. Students in the end have to make up their own minds. They must decide for themselves what they believe the course teaches. Yet they also need the help for interpreters, of experts, people who have devoted their lives to understanding the course. Both of these factors are true, but together they present us with a difficulty. If you need an expert, but you yourself are not an expert, how do you know how to evaluate what the expert says? One of the oldest and best answers to this question is that you listen to different experts commenting on each other's views. To pick an extreme example, if you hear about a radical theory in the field of cosmology and you yourself are not qualified to evaluate it, which is most probably true, you naturally want to hear what professional cosmologists say about it. Evaluating interpretations of the course is not as specialized as evaluating theories in cosmology, yet the same basic need exists. When a course student confronts the teachings of Kevin Wapnick, there is an obvious power differential. That student knows that he or she is only a mere student, whereas Ken Wapnick was close to Helen Schuckman, helped edit the course, heads up a large center, has written a pile of books on the course, and even owns the copyright. This power differential puts the student at a distinct disadvantage. The student may not feel convinced by what Wapnick says, but may think, who am I to question Kev Wapnick? The time-honored way to equalize the situation is for students to hear what other qualified interpreters have to say about Wapnick's teachings. Then the student is in a good position to make a truly informed decision, even if that decision ends up being that his or her inner sense was wrong and that Wapnick was right after all. That is the very simple idea behind this book. Ideally, it would be a true dialogue between Wapnick and the circle. However, Wapnick declined our request to respond to the essays in this book, and for many years has declined our repeated invitations to engage in a public dialogue. To our knowledge, he does not publicly dialogue with anyone about the question of what the course teaches. Why therefore had to do the next best thing? Perdón, no es una pregunta, it's not an answer, a question. We therefore had to do the next best thing, respond to his views by ourselves. This, of course, leaves us open to misrepresenting his views. For this reason, we have done our utmost to be fair. We have based our representations of his views on quotes from his own writings and have done our best to keep from caricaturizing his views. Addressing the ideas of an influential thinker in any field is, as we all know, standard procedure in the world. It is an integral part of how human understanding moves forward. Yet, some of the feedback we received when we published 2 of his book's essays in our newsletter said that we shouldn't be talking about differences. Not talking about difference in course interpretation can sound spiritual, but can you imagine that being standard practice in other fields? Can you imagine that being standard practice in other fields? Can you imagine the field of psychology, for example, if it were taboo to respond to the ideas of Freud? In fact, while Helen Schuckman was taking down the early chapters of the text, the author of the course himself responded to the ideas of Freud, freely expressing both agreements and disagreements. He was not at all shy about addressing differences. Another frequent response to that newsletter was the claim that both Wapnick and the Circle are really saying the same thing, that in effect there are no differences. This seemed to stem, at least in part, from a discomfort with the possibility that someone was right and someone was wrong. While we acknowledge that differences in views are often more apparent than actual, the simple fact is that not all views can be right. If someone claimed that the course's message is to hate your brother, would we really want to say, well, that's right too? If we want the real truth, we must be willing to identify what is not true. Otherwise, the truth gets lost amidst all those falsehoods we are so open-mindedly affirming. Likewise, if we want to know what the course really says, we must be willing to identify what it does not say. If a view is false, if it does not reflect the course, we should let it fall by the wayside, not with anger, but with dispassion. One of the road to the truth, we must be willing to let 1,000 views fall by the wayside. On the road to the truth, we must be willing to let 1,000 views fall by the wayside. All that matters is the truth. For this same reason, the course is not shy about saying that we are wrong. We are in page 12. We are going to stop here now. Muchas gracias. Bendiciones para todos.